Let's see how we can use bookmarks in Power BI to really make your reports pop. Let's go. Okay, let's use the same report example that I used for my last tooltips video, which if you haven't seen, go check it out because it shows some really cool ways of using tooltips to really enhance your report. Okay, on the same page, I have a bunch of different examples of bookmarks. Now, Power BI uses bookmarks in two different ways. They say you can use bookmarks to change your data state or change your visual state. And so I have examples of both of those changes here. So data state example are these buttons up top, where I can toggle, let's say GM Golf versus Good. And as I'm doing it, you can see the data on the entire page changes. I'm basically toggling between YouTube channels, kind of like a slicer. Now the visual state example is this more channels and filters button that I created, where I press that and you can see a new window pops up on the same page, but the data doesn't change. As I kind of toggle between them, you can see nothing changes. But I can use these filters here, then the slicers to further change the data. Okay, so those are visual and data examples. Another really cool bookmark example that I really like to do are these tabs down below. You can actually make Power BI kind of look like you have different tabs, and you can add a bunch of these and you can change them to averages, totals. I could even add min, max, whatever it is. And you click these tabs and it changes kind of the page look. It's another way of getting more pages within Power BI report pages. So you can really increase the volume of data that you show in one single page. Okay, let's jump right into exactly how we do each and every one of these. Okay, so I opened up an older version of this report before I created all those bookmarks in Power BI Desktop, and we're going to go through the process of recreating all of those right now together. So the first step, let's recreate those three buttons up top and show Good, GM Golf, and Rick Shields. Before I had a slicer here, but I want to create those buttons. So the first step is to go to View, Bookmarks. It opens up a bookmarks pane right here where you can create and manage your bookmarks. So the first thing I want to do is create a bookmark, again, a data state bookmark for Good. So all I need to do right now is just hit add bookmark. And when you hit add bookmark, Power BI will save the current state, both data and visual, but you can change that. So first step I do, let's rename this. I'm going to call this Good, since that's the channel we're selecting. Now I don't want it to change the visual state, so what's displayed and what's not, but I do want it to keep that slicer. So I uncheck display. That's it. Right click and uncheck display. Now the bookmark will only keep the data state when you select that. Now let's add another bookmark. Let's do Bubby Golf. I don't know. And from there, I hit add and I uncheck display. And again, rename this. I'm going to call it Bubby. And then let's do one more. Let's do GM Golf. Hit add, uncheck display, rename to GM Golf. Now I have three bookmarks, which let's click them now. I hit Good, and you can see the slicer and all the data changes. Bubby, same thing. GM Golf, same thing. So these are data state bookmarks. And how I did it before is I actually just created buttons. So you go to Insert, Buttons, and then I like to start with blank buttons. And then let's customize it because there's some really cool stuff you can do with these buttons. So let's just create one button and then kind of just copy and paste. So Style, Default, this is important. Let's change the border. Let's make it this nice baby blue that we've been using everywhere. Okay. And then let's add some text, which would be in this text thing right here. And let's call this is going to be our Good button. Nothing fancy. We can make it look better. We made it look better in our end report, but we're doing this quick. So let's do it quick. And I'm also going to turn off the visual border, which is in addition to the buttons kind of border. Okay, so Good. And then I'm going to take this button and I'm going to assign it the action. So you click the button and in the properties area, there's an action. So toggle that on. Do the type and do bookmark, and then select the bookmark that we created. So we created Good. So now when we click the button, it'll actually go to the bookmark Good. Now before we change anything, it kind of looks like a button, but it kind of doesn't. You want it to be a little bit more interactive. So when I hover over it, I want to change color so it looks like it. So I select this, go to Style, and instead of default, let's select on hover, and then maybe let's add a little bit of background when we hover over it. Look at that. Now when we hover over it, you see how the background comes in? This looks a lot more like a button. And then we also want it to look different when you press it, so it kind of looks and makes the user feel like they're pressing something. And so what I usually like to do for this is actually make it even darker on press. So you go back to the state on the right side and change to on press. And then let's change the background color to the same thing, but maybe just a deeper shade, so a little less transparent. Okay, so let's look at this button. I hover over it, it has a slight blue. I click it. You see how it got darker for a second and then went white again? That's really nice. So this now looks like a button that is doing something when you press it. Okay, now let's copy and paste this a few times and rename, reassign to different bookmarks, so on and so forth. Go to style, text, change this to Bubby Golf, and then let's do the same thing with the next one. Oh, see, okay, here's a good point. You can actually change the text, not just the background like we did on hover on press. And so we just changed it on press. Let's change the default of this to Bubby Golf, which means it'll always say Bubby Golf, which is what we want. Let's do the same thing over here. Default, let's change this to GM Golf. Okay, now we click the last thing is we need to change the action. So they go to different bookmarks. Bubby Golf, action, change the bookmark to Bubby. GM Golf, action, change to GM Golf. Now we click these buttons and look at that. Pretty cool. Now let's move these over because we're going to create that other expandable slicer filter menu. I have this one slicer right here, which I could include here as well. Or in some reports, you're really fighting for space. And so you need a whole new window to really make your slicer stand out. So in this case, let's just create, first of all, a button where we can expand things out. To like click so you can open this new slicer window. And all we're really doing with bookmarks is we're adding new shapes and visuals and then hiding and showing them. That's it. We're not doing anything else that's super fancy. So let's add a couple shapes. Let's add a couple chevrons. I guess they're called chevrons. Let's rotate them. Rotation, let's say all 90 degrees. Great. Make it small, make it look like a button. Okay, make 2, that's good. Take off the border. If you remember, I have in my template, I have this visual border which always turns on. And so let's take that off. There we go. Now these are kind of looking like buttons, and let's insert a text, a button. Here's the key. A blank button which says something like style. Let's change the text. What do we want to say? We want to say click here for more slicers. Something like that. Let's make it a lot smaller. You can update this however you want. Make this look a lot better than I'm making it look for this quick and dirty demo. But for the style, I'm actually going to remove the border. I'm going to make this look like a text box at the top. Really, if they click on it, it'll still work as a button, but I'm really intending for them to click on these little chevrons down below. You know, but if they click kind of anywhere in that area, the same thing will happen, which is kind of what we want. We want to make this a little user foolproof for the users. Great, first things first. And now let's create what this slicer window will look like when we open it. So let's create the shape. I'm going to create a shape, maybe something like this. I don't know, style's fine, I guess. Let's insert some text and call it additional filters or something like that. Make this a lot bigger. You can make this look a lot better as well, but you know, here we are. This is just a quick video. You can make this as sexy as you want it to be. Probably better than I can. Great. And now another thing, again, I'm going to take off this border. I should really turn it off. And then let's add those slicers. So go to View, Selection Pane. We already have a slicer for GM Golf. Let's add that here. I need to change the formatting because it's transparent. It looks bad against this background. So let's just go to General, Effects, turn on the background. That's a little bit better. Okay, now it's a slicer. We can change the channel. Let's add some others. Let's add, I just did a Control-C, Control-V. Let's add a date. So instead of the channel, let's add a date slicer, which they can do this way, or let's make this a range of dates. Real quick, instead of drop down, let's do a between and do all the dates. Great, that looks better. And of course, I can format this to look a little bit better. Here we are, we're doing our thing. Great. Okay, next step, figure out how to close this thing. So to make that easy, I'm going to add the slicers and this text box to a group. So I'm going to select all three using Control Select. And then you can see in my selection pane here, I can right click, hit group, and then let's just double click the name to rename it. Let's say slicer pane. And that way, if I hit this little eyeball button next to it, I can hide and show it, which is all we're doing with bookmarks, is just hiding and showing this pane. Okay, now I'm actually going to make this a little bit smaller, just to make it look a little bit. It's not taking up as much space. Great, that looks better. I'm also going to make the shape a little bit lighter because I want my buttons to stand out, because I'm going to add a button here on the right that says close. And so let's hide this now. Let's take these buttons that we used to open it, copy, I just hit Control-C, and let's paste them move them to the right, and that way we can have some continuity here. I'm going to change this to say close pane, or close slicers, and then I'm gonna bump the size of this up, make it nice and big. Great. I'm gonna rotate these around because these shouldn't be 90, they should be 270. Pointing up because you kind of closing means. Okay, great. Now we have a button. Now we just like we did before, we need to assign a bookmark. And so I'm gonna go to View, Bookmarks. The thing is, we don't have a bookmark yet. And so now let's do what we do best and create our bookmarks. Right before we do that, these 3 things we just created, click and drag them into this group because we want, when we hide the slicer pane, we want those buttons to be hidden as well. So you can hide, everything hides. Okay, so first bookmark, let's just create a bookmark with this view. So I'm just gonna go to Bookmarks, Add Bookmark. Now key here, this is a display or a visual state, as they call it. So uncheck, I right click the bookmark we just created, uncheck the data piece. That way, if we change the slicers, the data won't change when we show and hide this filter pane. I'll show you what it does if we don't do that actually in a second. So do that, let's rename it, let's call it closed filters, because right now it's just the closed filters, right? We're not seeing them. Let's show this pane and let's hit add, uncheck data and rename this, call it open filters. Okay. Now, if I hit close filters, it's not there. Open filters, it's there, right? Pretty cool. Next is we just assign these buttons. I click this click here for slicers box, which is a button. I'm gonna hit bookmark. I'm gonna go to my open filters. I'm also gonna assign that to the 2 little arrows as well. That way, if they click, the user clicks anywhere kind of in that area, it'll work, which is what we want. Make it foolproof. Bookmark, open filters. That way, if I click that, it opens it up. Likewise, assign the bookmarks to these buttons, but I'm going to assign the closed filters button bookmark. I can talk today. Closed filters bookmark, assign closed filters, same thing with the button. Just do it all around. That way, if they click on, anywhere near the area, it'll work. Click the area, it closes. Okay, now real quick demo. Let's take these and I'm going to keep the data display. So it's data. If I change this to, I kept the data display, right? But I'm gonna close and hide, nothing changes now. But if I were to go to Bubby Golf, and let's change this to Grant Horvat Golf, okay? That's what we wanna change. And we also want, when we hit close slicers, for it to still show Grant Horvat Golf. And so if I click that, it's not going to. See how it changed back to Bubby Golf? That's because we retained the data state of the bookmark, which is when I created the bookmark, Bubby was filtered, so it kind of freezes that state. Which is why when you create a filter pane like this on these bookmarks, you want to uncheck data. That way, when I change it to Grant, right, it's supposed to change the report, and then when I close, the Grant Horvat stays on, which is exactly what we want. So that's a really good demonstration of data state versus visual state. With this last button, we just want to retain the visual state. Okay, little hint here, which is they can hit close slicers. If you want to make this even more user-friendly, which is a really cool feature to do, add in an extra button, just a blank button, cover the entire page. And there are a few key aspects of this. Take off this style, take off the border that we see. So it's like completely blank. And I want to add this button into the slicer piece, but I want to add it below the shape. So drag it all the way to the bottom of the slicer pane. So that way it's below this kind of pane up top, but it's above everything else, right? All my visuals. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go general. I'm going to make this a slightly transparent background. Let's say gray and like 82% transparency. Let's go a little less. That way you have this filter pane open. It kind of like makes everything in behind it a little hazy. You can play with the transparency to kind of make it what you want, right? But that looks kind of good. It looks like it's its own piece. Now you can close and open it. So that's good. But the key here is if the user clicks anywhere other than this kind of like additional filters blue box, you want the filter pane to close. That's kind of UI behavior that you see on a lot of websites and other tools, which you can mimic in Power BI by taking the shape and just this blank shape. And again, what do we do to these shapes? We assign the bookmark. That way, the closed filters bookmark. That way they can hit close slicers, which works. Let's open it up. Or they can click anywhere else in this gray area and it'll close. So kind of like a nice user-friendly way of doing it. Okay, that's pretty much a summary of Bookmarks. So if that's all you want to know, great, you can stop here. Next, though, I'm going to show you how to make tabs, which is the last piece we're going to show today, and one of the coolest ways I think you can really use Bookmarks. Is first, what I'm going to do is it's basically, I'm going to create buttons, but I'm going to cheat it a little bit. So we already know how buttons work. We already did that up here. So I copied and pasted a button here. And we're going to create tabs. So first, I want to do average views and total views. I actually already created a visual called total views, which I hid, right? I copied and pasted the average views and changed the measure to total views and likes instead of average views and likes, right? So I'm just going to the selection pane and I'm showing and hiding things. So that's all I want my bookmarks to do. Now I could take this button. Let's just show a quick visual state of what this looks like. I could create buttons here. I'm just copying and pasting these because it's easy to reuse things. Let's say default state. I want to change this to average, or show averages, and then totals. And then let's see, I'm showing average right now. So let's create a new bookmark. Uncheck data, don't forget, since this is a visual thing we're doing, and call this average likes. And then show total and hide averages. Let's actually get this back down to month. There we go. And then create a new bookmark and call it uncheck data and call it total likes or total views. Likes, views and likes. I'm showing both in the same thing. Now if we do average, show averages, total, show total. Assign those to these buttons, average views, totals, total view. Great. That works great. Let's make these tabs. All the tabs is it's really just buttons kind of hidden behind to make it look like tabs. I'm cheating a little bit, right? So you just kind of drag this down, take a button, move it over here, somewhat close. Go to the style of this. Let's round the corners because tabs look a little rounded. And I'll show you what this is going to look like real soon. So the border feature doesn't have a rounding. There is a rounding setting on here, shape. I want a rectangle. Let's do 10 pixel rounding. See how it's a little smoother on the side? That looks a little bit better. Let's add this other button up here. Let's also round the corners of this. I'll show you why in a second. And then also for the style, a couple things. Let's move it up. Let's make sure that the text is displayed at the top. And now all we need to do is hide these buttons. You always want your slicer pane to be at the top, by the way. But these two buttons that we created, let's rename them so I don't forget which ones we're looking at because we have a lot of buttons and shapes. And let's hide them underneath the total views and average views. Now they're looking a little more like tabs, right? Not bad. Okay, but we want to see which is, let's move averages down to kind of shape it to look like, there we go. Averages, total, right? Kind of looks like tabs. You don't know which is which. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this. And let's make this look like it's a selected tab. I'm going to take off the action. And this is important. And then let's just make this a little darker. Oof, I don't know. Let's change the fill. The fill at all? Let's just change the color to like darker blue. Yeah. And then change the text to maybe a white text. And obviously push this behind the visual, the bar chart, but in front of the other. So now it kind of looks like it's a little more selected. Let's do the same thing. Let's copy and paste this, make this the same as totals. Let's just change this to our totals. And now we actually need to update. I'm going to move this, rename this to totals, move this down. Let's actually rename averages selected, totals selected. Now what we want is when we see total views, we want this averages selected to be gone. So I just hid that. And now it's like we have totals, and so you select averages, it'll change to averages, but it'll hide this selected button. Okay, that's what we want to see. So let's update our bookmarks. And now a couple key points is that we want to update this bookmark to only affect this visual. And I'll show you why this is important. Well, we can do that. Let's do it for the one up top. But first, let's update the bookmark to show and hide these blue tabs that we just created. So this is averages. Just go here, average views bookmark, right click and hit update. Let's click this total view. See how the averages and totals is still showing because we created these new selected boxes. Let's hide it. Totals, that's what we want to look like. Update the total bookmark. So now select averages, select totals. Now you have little tabs. And you can get fancy. You can add like a white line to cover this border up to make it look more like an integrated tab. You can do a bunch of different things. But that's that. Those are bookmarks. Pretty cool. right? Okay, now one last thing. If you really want to hang on for 5 more minutes, notice how when I selected this, we're getting advanced bookmarks here. When I selected this, look how the total and averages buttons showed up. And also, if I can no longer select my toggles because it's not there. It's because when I created these bookmarks, I'm basically hiding or saving the visual state of everything we see. And when we create new visuals, those get just shown by default. And so what I want to do is this open and close buttons, these bookmarks, I only want it to affect this pane. So no matter what else I do to the dashboard, this stays the same. So what I want to do is I want to select the slicer pane in my selection pane. And when I hit open filters, I want to update it. I want to hit selected visuals and then hit update. That means it'll only save the visual state for visuals that I have currently selected. And then I want to hide this. I still want to select it even though it's hidden. And then I'm going to go close filters, select visuals, and then hit update. Now, if I hit my, kind of reset the bottom, hit my averages and total views. If I'm totals and I select this, notice how my bookmarks down below don't change. They don't like kind of mess up each other. So that's why is because we're saving this bookmark to only affect the visuals that we selected instead of by default, it'll save the state of the visuals for everything on the page. Okay, so that was an advanced masterclass of bookmarks. We have data states and we have visual or display states as Power BI calls them. And you can use bookmarks to really make anything pop. You can use bookmarks to jump to different pages, which we didn't do. You can use bookmarks to do a lot of things and make your reports a lot more user-friendly. Because if I learned anything from doing Power BI reports for years and years, is that people will find a way to not understand your report. No matter how simple you think it is, somebody will not understand it. So the easier and easier you can make things, the better. And if you can do that with bookmarks to make things a lot more user-friendly and intuitive, highly recommend it. You will be applauded. I hope you learned something about bookmarks today. Click the link below to get the final file that contains everything about bookmarks and also tooltips from the other video, which you can watch on my YouTube channel. Otherwise, please subscribe and like, and I'll see you in the next one.